Welcome to the Soul Archaeology podcast, a space for connection, resonance, witnessing, and learning. Together we'll harvest medicine from the spiral of life, sharing conversations with other embodied humans who have navigated their own initiations and found alignment with their true soul essence. With weekly astrology, energy updates, embodied conversation, and channeled teachings, this is a space for you to land and find resonance with the spiral of your own soul. Hello there. Welcome back to Soul Archaeology. I'm happy to be back here with you. And this episode is all about eclipse season. We are just coming off of the heels of a very, very potent and powerful full moon in Aries. I don't know about all of you, but I know I felt it right when it landed. I have a Mars in Aries that was retrograde when I was born. So it's taken time for me to feel into it, to integrate it. It's taken really until more recently to feel, the full potential of that placement. And so on Thursday, right when the moon entered Aries, it was right over my Mars, and I could literally feel it in my physical body. I felt this wave of energy come through my entire body, and it felt like anxiety because it's been not tricky, but it's been a journey for me to recognize what's anxiety and what's my power fully activating and turning on. And that's something to note that, if you do energy work, or if you're, working in intuitive healing, or you're really opening your lower chakras, specifically your solar plexus, you might feel this rush or this surge of life force that turns on, and it can feel like anxiety. So the more you open, of course, there's the psychological layers of getting used to our own power, but also there's a physical layer of it. And what we interpret as anxiety, which can oftentimes just really be our power or excitement or that activation that's turning on within us to mobilize. But anyway, so I felt that come on. I was actually in a session, and I had just grounded. So I knew what it was, and I could feel it, and I could utilize it within the session. But it was just pretty wild because I looked, after the session, I looked at the chart, and I realized, oh yeah, Mars had, the moon had just entered Aries, and it was right on top of my Mars. And so the full moon was a big one. We've been exploring this Aries energy more intimately since July, when the North Node officially entered Aries, the South Node Libra. And I talk a lot about this, so you've heard me talk about the nodes, the lunar nodes. But I really want to do a deep dive today on these eclipses that we're entering into. And I always say that I feel that eclipse season opens a month before the first eclipse, and then it's open for a month afterwards. And then really, when we have eclipses come in pairs, but they're spaced 6 months apart. So there's a 6-month period of time until the next eclipse portal. And this time and space, since we're officially closing the Taurus Scorpio axis this month with the lunar eclipse in Taurus on October 28th. This is the last eclipse along this axis for quite some time. We will be moving forward into 2024 and 2025, seeing eclipses along the Aries Libra axis instead of Taurus and Scorpio, which is where we've been for quite some time. Really, we had our first eclipse along this axis in November 2021. So there's sort of like an in-between space at the end of a lunar node cycle where we can have an eclipse in the new cycle or the old one, even though the lunar nodes aren't technically there. And that's what's occurring this month. So we're having an eclipse, a solar eclipse in Libra on October 14th, and a lunar eclipse in Taurus on October 28th. So there's this beautiful Venusian essence to the month of October already because of Libra, it being Libra season, but also because we have these eclipses in Venusian signs. Which of course brings us deeper into our relational work, which is something we've been working through for a while. In a different way with Scorpio and Taurus, it was more around attachments and power and nervous system regulation, attachment systems, things like that. But this is different. And first, I'd really like to talk about eclipses in particular, what they are, what they mean, what the lunar nodes, how the lunar nodes impact eclipses, and what we're here to really learn and extract from this time. So eclipses essentially are when the moon touches the lunar nodes, and the lunar nodes are the upper and lower boundaries of the moon's own elliptical orbit. And when the moon reaches this threshold, it forms a perfect alignment with the sun and earth. So a solar eclipse occurs when we have a new moon, when the sun is obstructed by the moon and essentially turns day into night. And a lunar eclipse happens on a full moon when the moon is shadowed by the earth, and it kind of turns into that reddish hue. So an eclipse is really the moon interacting with its nodes, interacting with destiny, karma, dharma. And so these are extremely, extremely powerful celestial events. And they bring, it's almost like having a new moon or a full moon on steroids. They don't just deal with one lunar cycle. So, when we have a new moon and a full moon each lunar cycle, right? So what this is it's actually looking at more of a zoomed out evolutionary perspective. So it's not just dealing with our day-to-day, that dealing with the occurrences within that particular lunar cycle. What it's dealing with is a more zoomed out evolutionary pattern, or something we need to work through, something we need to release or bring in order to really shift our evolutionary path. So eclipses really impact our evolutionary trajectory. They impact our destiny within this life. They connect us into what we need to see, to release, to invite in order to help us find more alignment. And we can't really talk about eclipses without talking about the lunar nodes. And the lunar nodes essentially are really the upper and lower boundaries of the moon's orbit. And what they are through an astrological lens is they are the points that within our own personal experience, our natal points that direct our evolutionary focus. So they represent really our karma and our dharma, where we've been and where we're headed. Natally, this is, of course, an internal focus. It's a focus of our own individual path, and it's unique to each and every one of us. And I've talked about, our own natal nodes and how we can work with them to really lean into our north node and release our south node tendencies, because we've been there, we've done that. But when we're talking about it with the eclipse focus, we're talking about the collective lunar nodes, or the transiting lunar nodes, where the lunar nodes currently are, and how that impacts us not only individually, but also collectively. And so with the transiting lunar nodes in Aries and Libra, it's really asking for us to focus on the axis of the self and the other within our own personal lives, and then collectively as well. And so, of course, this impacts each of one of us differently depending on where they land within your own personal chart. But it is certainly honing in on relationships within our lives, our patterns, our tendencies, the things, the behaviors, or the limiting beliefs, or the subconscious programs that are running that impact the way we connect with people, the way we connect with others, romantic relationships, work partnerships. And with the North Node being in Aries, it is asking for us to own our power, to really step into onto our evolutionary purpose, our path. Because having the North Node in Aries means you're here to activate your power, to really taste it, to feel it, to embody it. It's not your comfort zone necessarily. Your comfort zone would be Libra, which is, a little bit more passive, can certainly sort of contort to people please or to keep the peace or to harmonize. But having a North Node in Aries means that you came here with those tendencies and you're here to really learn how to shift into your power. So when we look at that through a collective lens with the transiting nodes, it's showing us where in our lives we need to step into our power and release any tendencies to abandon self, to people please, to perhaps quote unquote keep the peace in order to let things settle, which essentially is just avoidance, but also to understand where we need perhaps healthy rupture, activation, opening, rather than, just deferring to the other person or bypassing or avoiding it it altogether. Because we're looking at it through an evolutionary lens always, where the transiting North Node, where Aries lands in your chart, is where you're being pushed to speak your truth, to own your power. The archetype of Aries is the highest expression of it is the conscious warrior. And I've talked a lot about this, so I'm not going to go into this too much in this episode, but it's really where we're being asked to take radical self-responsibility, leadership over our lives, to take the reins of our lives into our own hands and take action, really harness, move through the fears that inevitably come up when we are pushing up against our walls of familiarity and comfort, and to step through, transmute, to say yes, even when it feels terrifying to do so, but it's part of your destiny. And I know if you're listening to this, you're feeling this somewhere in your life. You can feel this push. I feel it like it's almost like a pressure on my chest. I can feel it where I'm, it's where I'm perhaps resisting my power or where I'm resisting my voice. My voice just literally cracked a little bit, which is hysterical, and it's 3:33 when I just was recording this. So it's wild, but I can feel it. I can feel the pressure building. So notice where the pressure is building in your life. This is where you will see this eclipse activity happening. And the lunar nodes really help us. They're sort of like a map. I always say it's truly a soul blueprint map. So if we want to look at an easy way or maybe a very straightforward way to get clarity on a decision or, the alignment of our life is looking at how much are you leaning into your South Node and how afraid are you of leaning into your North Node, because our North Node is not the comfort zone. So what this is revealing for all of us is where we resist our power, where we're afraid of embodying our fullest power. And we're being initiated into it because Aries initiates. It's the first sign of the zodiac. It moves, it creates change, it acts, it does whatever it needs to essentially in order to follow its most direct path towards its purpose. So I've been talking to a lot of new people, which is so fun, doing a lot of explore astrology sessions. And I've been noticing that each and every single person I'm talking to is feeling a push somewhere to create a big change, whether it's with work, the type of work you're doing, or just leaning more into things that feel like your purpose, work that feels fulfilling. A lot of changes within relationships, relational patterns, but also ending or beginning new relationships, starting to really speak your truth. I think that the last, probably 5 years, many of us have realized things about the world and our perceptions and our beliefs. And so working towards owning that more, speaking your truth more, getting fully behind what you actually believe and not being afraid of rocking the boat or being afraid of being judged, which is, the shadow of Libra, sort of just going with the flow or agreeing with things just to fit in or to create harmony or to not create disruption. And Aries it's just not afraid of disruption. And I was working with a client yesterday who has a moon in Aries and a Mercury in Aries. And she's truly the most direct person I've ever met. If there's not confrontation, clarity that's created in conversation or connection, she feels really uncomfortable. But there's also a lot of shame that can come from that, right? Because we are such an avoidant society. So what we're doing is releasing those avoidant tendencies, those tendencies to pull away from our fears and stay in our comfort zone, to kind of fall back into the herd or the crowd, instead of really, really, really stepping through the fire, owning exactly how we feel or what we believe, because we truly, truly, truly need more evolutionary leaders in this life. And if you're listening to this, I have a feeling you are being pushed into your leadership, into your Aries. So I was even working with this client on how she can really cultivate the leader within, because that's really her dharma, honestly, is leadership, and she can feel it. And her work right now is refinement, really working on, allowing a healthy amount of Libra to come through to really balance her fire and her flame, but also moving into that conscious leadership, so being aware of what's occurring, having a lot of awareness, a lot of presence in order to lead through our higher heart. And that's what we're really being called to, is leadership through the higher heart. And that takes a lot of evolution. It takes a lot of risk. It takes a lot of leaps of faith, of trusting the universe. When, anytime we're being asked to take a leap of faith, there's always a fear that gets kicked up because it's not familiar, So the lunar nodes in these signs are really, really pushing us into our power, releasing codependency, our willingness to keep the peace in order to not rock the boat, not disrupt. And it's also having us look at what is our purpose, like what really drives us, what fuels our fire, what lights us up, and leaning into that. And because eclipses are essentially new moon and full moons on steroids, this is when they align with the lunar nodes in this way, they are big, huge evolutionary portals. They come in along that axis and they create huge change. They bring things in and they release things that need to be released. They're really karmic aids. So I always tell people there's a lot of energy around eclipses. And I think a lot of it, honestly, is ancestral, because many of our ancestors maybe didn't fear eclipses necessarily, but felt a certain way about them, certainly held them in reverence and understood the power and the magnetism of them. If you go back, hundreds of generations, we can all draw a line to a lineage that honored eclipses. It has to, because they're just incredibly powerful celestial events. And so I think some of it is ancestral, and we're kind of here to clear it, because we are here to realize we have free will. We have an incredibly powerful generator within us that can move with this energy and work with it rather than against it. And also our evolved awareness, knowing that these are karmic aids. So they're here to really help us. And we're also human and typically have a tendency to fear change and fear things that are out of our control. And because eclipses are so out of our control, they kind of come in and they remove and bring things in without asking permission, which is their job. It can feel scary, right? So even if you know that good things are happening, there still can be a little bit of fear that gets kicked up because we are out of control. We're surrendering, right? Which kicks up a lot of fear. And especially because they're new moons and full moons on steroids, as we like to say. So they essentially magnify anything that's out of alignment within our lives. And they create really big life shifts. They're not just, smaller day-to-day shifts. They are big. They're not here to mess around. And eclipses always come in pairs. So they come in as a solar eclipse and a lunar eclipse, or lunar eclipse and a solar eclipse, but they have a certain agenda, right? And this agenda plays out over the course of the lunar node transit, which is 18 months. So we can have eclipses, like an eclipse story can sort of play out over a year and a half to 2 years. Because they occur within a specific lunar node axis. So this lunar node axis we're on now began in July and will go into 2025. So we're entering a new chapter with new themes, right? So it's the beginning. And like I said, the lunar nodes follow an 18-month cycle. So they move through an axis. So they move through two different signs, which are always opposite of one another every 18 months. And it takes a full 18 years to complete a full cycle. So we really have a lunar node return every 18 years. So if you're in your mid to late 30s, you are entering probably the first lunar return that lunar node return that you're conscious of, unless you're 18 and listening to this, and then amazing. I wish I knew this at 18. Oh my God. But what this essentially is it's a checkpoint. So I've been working with a lot of people who have their North Node in Aries and their South Node in Libra, and I can feel it within them. They're getting pressured, they're getting really put into that pressure cooker and asked to step into their power, to honor their worth, to honor their self. Typically these people have a pattern of, sometimes self-abandonment or codependency, or, just sort of like dissolving into the background, and the discomfort of leaning into their North Node in Aries is going to be magnified right now. Even if you don't have your lunar nodes in Aries and Libra, you are going to be feeling it, because Aries it's big. And we also have Chiron interacting with this lunar node transit as well, because Chiron is in Aries and it will be until 2027. So we are examining our identity, our own internal power. This really began in 2019, which we all know was right before COVID times. So we started this Chiron and Aries initiation then, and now is really like, we're just sort of cranking the dial on it. And I talked about this in the last episode, so I won't really go deeply into it, but from now until 2027, we're doing some deep work. And so it's sort of like conditioning. Like we're being asked to go through evolutionary boot camp to really honor our power, our worth, to transmute, pass through the fears that keep us from it, because we need more conscious warriors. We need more conscious leaders. And of course, it can be tricky, because the shadow of Aries is that it can be self-centered and self-absorbed. And so we're always wanting to sort of balance it with, the Libran tendency to focus on the other, and so that's why I say conscious warrior, because it's not leaning into the shadow of Aries, but it's leaning into the highest expression of it, harvesting the medicine from the highest expression. So with these eclipses, we are activating anything keeping us from our fullest power, any fears that are keeping us from that. Anything that's telling us that we are not worthy of it, or that, we have all these people to care for, and how can we follow our true path, our calling, our dharma. Or it's really scary to take the leap of faith from this really comfy, cozy relationship or job. And that's just, we can feel is sort of that we're settling or just people pleasing and staying in it. And eclipses they're kind of like tough love. They're like, listen, we know, we get it, but we've got to push you out of your comfort zone. We have to shake things up. We have to activate the change that you're afraid to lean into. And so they definitely can feel like almost like, you're standing on the high dive and a friend lovingly pushes you. We all have that friend, right? And so every 18 years, like I said, we hit the same, it completes a full cycle. So we hit the same North Node point. But every 9 years, we hit the same lunar node axis. I hope that makes sense. So because it takes 18 years to go a full cycle, it only takes 9 years to hit halfway, which means that the North Node in Aries in 2013 and 2016, the North Node was in Libra, so it was the opposite. So what you'll want to do is just take some time and perhaps journal a little bit. I love the idea of working with the energy and feeling empowered during eclipse season. So you can start working with it weeks before. This is why I'm putting this episode out in plenty of time before we have our first eclipse, because I like people to feel empowered. You can start journaling now and start preparing for where do I see this showing up in my life? You can look at your chart, the houses, you can just intuitively feel into it. I have a feeling most of you are feeling this activate in certain areas of your life, and just looking at that and saying, what am I missing? How can I potentially create, take the reins in my own hands, which Aries loves, and start to create some of the change that I've been feeling pushed into and have been resisting for some time. Journaling about 2013 through 2016, when lunar nodes were along this axis the last time, perhaps what the theme was then, if that theme is still showing up in a similar way now, that pattern, that program, that theme wants to be seen, witnessed, activated, released within your life now. So I love really working with people and teaching them that they are a co-creator of their life. And so even though eclipses, they do what they need to do to redirect us, to reorient us, but we can start working with that energy beforehand, right? We're not just at the mercy of eclipse season. And also knowing that you always have to leave room for magic, and eclipses are not just challenging, they also bring in really, really beautiful opportunities, relationships, people. They bring things in and they move things out. So just keeping that in mind, that everything happening right now, I just worked with someone on this today, every single thing happening right now is happening for your greatest and highest good. It's creating some type of opportunity within your life to shift a pattern, to witness yourself in a different way, to integrate something more deeply, to release or to invite something else in. And when we can really shift from feeling victimized by astrological events to a co-creator with them, everything changes. So on October 14th, we have a solar eclipse in Libra, a new moon in Libra. And the last time we had an eclipse in Libra that was close to 21 degrees, which is where this eclipse is happening, it's 21 degrees Libra, was October 14th, 2004. So that's a long time ago. Time is moving so quickly and everything's changing so rapidly, but it's good to kind of think back to that timeline and perhaps even meditate on it, do some inner child work, sitting with that aspect of you, that part of you, that age, what you were feeling, what the patterns were that were coming up. I certainly know mine is occurring in my 12th house. So it's all about relationships, friendships, loss, letting go, my spiritual practice, leaning into, obviously being the Libran that I am, and the wanting to keep the peace, but also honoring myself in the process, not just sort of rolling over to appease people, but also, standing in my power and standing in my worth. So you can really look at where 21 degrees Libra lands in your chart and start preparing that part of your chart will be eclipsed on October 14th, which means you will see big changes and shifts in that area of your chart, in that area of your life. And it really can bring in some beautiful new energy with it being a new moon or solar eclipse. It can really bring in things that we're needing to provide clarity, balance, harmony, peace within our relationships, dealing with money, with it being a Venusian sign. So depending on where it lands in your chart, I feel like there's going to be a lot of newness coming in, perhaps new opportunities, new people. It is forming a square to Pluto, so that's something we want to notice. Pluto squaring the nodes currently, and the north and south node, which means that it's bringing forward even some of the Plutonic lessons we've been learning over the last 15 years with Pluto and Capricorn, and the systems that are in place that perhaps are no longer working, the way we viewed power, the way we viewed ourselves within the systems of the world, belief systems, all of the things. So, and Pluto also asks for evolution, change, surfacing of what's been hidden. So there might be a lot of new discoveries too, new realizations, perhaps things you didn't see before, because the subconscious likes to deliver clarity when we are ready for it, right? And then on October 28th, 2 weeks after the solar eclipse in Libra, we have a lunar eclipse in Taurus. And this is the ending, thank you, of the eclipse axis of Taurus and Scorpio. And I'm fine seeing this go. This was a big one. It was really muddy. It kind of carried with it, obviously, deep subterranean changes, really surfacing a lot of our trauma, a lot of our karma, past life trauma, things that we have carried for far too long that we needed to release, trudging through the kind of the muck of that South Node in Scorpio, and leaning into the body, into slowness, into practicality, into caring for ourselves, self-care, the nervous system, with the North Node in Taurus. But it was also a bit sticky. It kind of felt like we were moving through mud in a way. You might have felt stuck over the last few years. And this is, this shift is really a big opportunity to reflect on the last 2 years. What have you been working through since November of 2021? Is that still present in your life? Do you still feel the same way about it? Whether it's relationships or patterns in other areas, depending on where Scorpio and Taurus land in your chart. By October 28th, we will have Mars and Mercury in Scorpio opposing this lunar eclipse. We will have Jupiter in pretty close relation to this eclipse as well. So we have realizations in many different areas of our lives related to Taurus in particular, and Scorpio, because full moons are always helpful at magnifying any existing patterns or issues that are no longer serving, that aren't serving our greatest and highest good. We will be asked to bring balance back with the solar eclipse in Libra. These two signs will be really, really focusing on relationships because they are both Venusian signs. So we're looking for balance in the relational and money realm. So obviously, October is a very big month. I hope this was helpful in learning more about eclipse season, what it can do for us, what it provides, how we can work with it to perhaps dissolve some of the fear around it, some of the fear of loss of control, and knowing we do have some control, right? And it's wild. I'm pulling from the Untamed Elemental deck again because I just love it so much. And it's so tuned into the podcast. And it's crazy because I pulled the Moon card, which is just so wild. So the Moon is about devotion. The Moon orbits the Earth with devotional influence. Her phases symbolize immortality and eternality. She pulls and pushes with benevolent force, maintaining steadfast, universal alignment for all. Moon shapes the tides in stone, blood and bone, while the luminosity she offers stabilizes planetary climates and imbues us with the wisdom of her ebb and flow. Like the goddess herself, she is ardent and tender, a perfect reflection of light and a natural amplifier of dark. Moon summons your devotion. Her orbit is profound and necessary. Your intrinsic merit nourishes the lives of many, even if you don't realize it. Moon asks for you to take stock of where you are placing your loyalty. Is your devotional energy aligned with your values and desires? If so, Moon invites you to deepen into your commitment with the conviction that the returns will be great. If not, Moon asks you to reorient your gravitational pull to align with more fruitful uses of your devotion. When it's balanced, you feel nourished by your efforts, skillful loyalty. When it's imbalanced, putting precious energy into a void, loyalty without reciprocity. And to bring into balance, notice where you feel depleted in life and shift priorities. So I love this talk of devotion because I think in a lot of ways, so much of our work is about devotion. It's devotion to our path, devotion to our alignment. And that devotion can sometimes mean moving through fear, navigating sacrifice, And eclipses are all about reorienting. So reorienting your gravitational pull to align with more fruitful uses of your devotion. I just love it. It's so aligned. So thank you all for being here, for listening. Let me know how this episode landed for you. I'd love to hear about it, where you see this energy manifesting in your life. And if you don't mind leaving a 5-star review or 5-star rating, a lovely review, it helps me so, so much. If you want to share on Instagram, it helps me so much. If you find this useful or beneficial, sharing it with someone is wonderful too. I thank you from the bottom of my heart for your beautiful support, your devotion to your own path, and for being here. Have a beautiful week.